All right, good evening, guys. Ken at Tortoise Capital. This is the Foundational Trading Book Club review session number 9. It is March 6, 2024. So let's see where we are. Yeah, so here's where we are in the program. We're on session 9 tonight, March 6th. We're looking at pages 263 to 294. We are in section 12, which was a collection of a bunch of processes, methods, concepts, checklists, advice to improve the different parts of our trading practice. There's some things that we'll talk about that are system, self, and market, some that are concepts or mindsets, some that are planning, preparation, execution, and assessment. So these are all a lot of little golden nuggets, I would say, that will help us improve at each step in our journey. Next week, we're going to be looking at 10 featured traders. Having presented the materials in sections 1 through 9, in section 10, or session 10, I should say, we're going to look at 10 traders who have individually adapted our material to fit their circumstances. And it's a pretty wide-ranging set of traders. So chances are there's going to be one or more of those guys who are pretty closely aligned to your situation. And then that sort of gives you an idea of how a successful adaptation might occur. In 14, I'll talk a little bit more about any final questions that you have about your personal steps going forward based on the material we presented in the sessions 1 through 10. And so after next week, if you have specific questions for your own circumstances, that's where sending questions is actually going to be really important. Send it to longke@yahoo.com. Because this has been presenting standardized material up to about this point, but in session 11, section 14, we're really taking a look at your individual circumstances. So that's a chance for you to kind of check your own plan against our experience. And then session 12, the last section, any final question and answer or debriefing. I'll talk a little bit about some opportunities for other training going forward. But that's really kind of the last chance to get your question heard in this forum here. Okay. So that's where we are. Let me just go ahead and jump into the material. All right, so here we are on March 16th, session 9, book club meeting for foundational trading, pages 263 to 294. And we're looking at mastering the trade, part 3. Griff's chosen quote, learning and evolving is at the heart of systems thinking. And we're going to see a little bit more about systems thinking as a key word in orientation here shortly. I cannot recommend too highly the work of Dr. Michael Hall, who in many ways, discovered the same things Van found, which is that resilience, which Van used to call respondability, is based not on what happens to you, which you can't control, but on how we interpret it, how we react to it, what we do with it. The real life story of Viktor Frankl, who was a prisoner in the concentration camps, and his ability to overcome that is an inspiration in this area as well. So I want to start over here with the key words first. I want to take a look first at the top level concept of systems thinking. That's on pages 263 and 265. And it's really systems thinking as applied to traders. So I started my career as a systems thinker back when I was in high school and was studying the manufacturing process in the automobile industry as a shop monkey, the unskilled labor on the shop floor making a lot of parts. And among the things that I would have to do is sit there at a Pines bender, a hydraulic bender that bends tubing, and I would have a box full of parts, straight pieces of tubing, 1,000 of them, and I would have to put a piece of tubing into the Pines bender and then push two buttons. And when I pushed those two buttons, it activated the hydraulic bender, which would then take this on a swivel arm and pull the pipe and bend it around a circumference to the required distance, and it would come out of there now with the required bend. And that's how you make brake tubings. And I learned to study the process that went from the first idea of how do we solve the problem? The problem was, how do we route hydraulic fluid from the pedal over to the hydraulic brakes that are going to save the family's life? And I watched the guys that could imagine how to do that and then could turn that into a system that would have press a brake pedal, hit a pump, have fluid in here, and activate the brake on a wheel on all four brakes reliably for 100,000 miles, rain or shine, and have it reliable enough that you could put your family in it. And I watched how they could take that system and then take raw materials like these pieces of pipe and then run it through a multi-stage manufacturing process and turn it into a finished product that would work to specification. And knowing that at each station, there was a trained monkey like me who was responsible for that stage in manufacturing. And what had to come out of that was quality parts. So I began to understand how you could organize a human machine system to do all that. I then joined the Army, spent some time in units trying to get things done, was a natural systems thinker. In 1991, I took a Master's of Science degree from University of Southern California while I was stationed in Europe with a baby on the way. And it was a Master of Science in Systems Management, a graduate degree program that was designed to help Department of Defense produce very complicated systems like the B-1 bomber and nuclear submarines that would have to somehow figure out how to make a submarine work in all its dimensions. And their problem was that you had at least 4 different disciplines involved in the design of the submarine. You had a human system, you had a propulsion system, you had weapons system, and you had command and control. And there are expert engineers who know how to do each one of those things beautifully. But the problem was that when you put together a production and design team to make that submarine, whoever your senior engineer was coming from one of those disciplines, and whatever his discipline was, That's what the submarine ended up looking like. Like if you had a propulsion guy, then the nuclear power plant would take up most of the sub, and there wouldn't be any space left in here for the people and the weapons and the command and control. And similarly, if you had a human factors engineer guy, you would have relatively luxurious living quarters and a nice kitchen, but you wouldn't have room for the propulsion or the weapons. So their problem was solved by coming up with a way to integrate those subsystems. And so they needed a systems management engineer who could pull together each of those different disciplines and create a larger system of systems that would find ways to make the best trade-off while meeting the minimum requirements in each one of these dimensions. So I studied that for a couple years, and then applied it, from 1991 until today in every single professional and personal endeavor that I'm engaged in. I end up using systems thinking because it's the way the world works. It's to the point now where, just to make sure that I actually know the things that I know, I'm engaged in a year-long graduate certificate program with the Water Center for systems thinking. And the program is to give me the advanced facilitator credential that allows me to work as a representative of their organization, teaching and consulting in the world with their standard methods of systems thinking. And they've already offered me a position upon graduation. I'm only 2 months into the course, but they're ready to hire me. But anyway, I've used all that in my career as a trader, as a soccer coach, as a military professional, as an graduate school educator. Systems thinking is absolutely central to the way that I look at the world, and one of the ways that I've been able to be successful in all of those endeavors. You could think of systems thinking as a comprehensive analytical approach to problem solving that views problems as part of a wider dynamic system. So anything that you're concentrating on is really operating inside a larger environment, and it's moving and changing through time. And there are other actors and players in that environment, and the environment is changing as it goes through time based on those dynamic forces. So rather than looking at the world as a two-dimensional static snapshot, systems thinkers take a look at it in a more organic and holistic way. Well, systems thinking's been around from, officially and formally since the 1930s. It has different flavors where systems thinking was discovered to be a solution for managing complexity in the separate disciplines of biology, cybernetics, information theory, manufacturing, engineering, agriculture, mechanical engineering, construction, human relations, all of those. In each of those different dimensions, independently and simultaneously, systems thinkers were looking at the world they were living in and coming up with ways to figure out how to handle the complexity and dynamic nature of that part of human experience. And then some smart guys in the middle said, hey, look, the systems thinking going on in each of these individual places actually share many things in common. And maybe there is such a thing as systems thinking theory. And so that began a pursuit of trying to find ways to tie together all of these systems into a larger, deeper, fundamental understanding of the human experience. So you saw things like the Santa Fe Institute for Complexity and Systems Science developed to try to do all that. In our own modest way, what we're doing is taking the Waters Center for Systems Thinking And they have 15 habits of systems thinkers, plus half a dozen tools that can be used to understand and work with systems, plus about 8 different archetypes, different types of systems that, depending on the nature of your problem, one of those archetypes is an appropriate way to frame, understand, manage, and improve your local situation. So what I'm doing is turning that generic systems thinking theory into a specific application for traders. And I'm using the advanced facilitator course that I'm in to get their blessing on the course that I'm creating in order to make sure that I'm representing the body of knowledge to their standards. And I've already had a approval for the outline and the approach. It's just a matter of finishing up the work, which will be done in a couple of weeks. So in the future, you can look forward to a formal course from me on systems thinking and systems thinking for traders. 2 courses, actually, because I found that systems thinking is such an important contributor to success in every part of my life that I want to be able to share that. And I also want to show how we can specifically use systems thinking for traders to improve all our processes. So there's actually 2 courses coming. I'm designing a similar course for the United States Army to offer them a credential as a certified systems thinker at the basic level, which graduates of my trading course will also be able to get to, for those of you keeping score at home. So systems thinking in a nutshell then requires a deeper understanding of linkages between pieces and parts of a network, understanding those relationships and the interactions between those moving parts, and how the different behavioral choices and options of the members of a network end up characterizing the nature of the entire system. So you got to be able to understand not just the individual pieces, but how they operate together in various feedback loops. One method of looking at the world is through a mental model known as the SOT model, or the Strategy, Operational, Art, and Tactics model, that the Army uses and Department of Defense to understand the view from 30,000 feet, or at the wide angle view from a airplane, the grand scheme of things, large regions of the globe over many months and years of time. We would think of that as strategy. And we would think of tactics as what you do with the problem at hand. How do you get across that river? How do you get around the corner without getting shot? How do you seize the objective safely? So tactics is the particular technique that we use to solve individual, shorter-term, narrowly focused problems. So if tactics is the little pieces and strategy is the grand vision, operations turns out to be how we arrange our forces and resources in time and space, and how we sequence and prioritize our activities in order to ensure that we are in the right location, solving the right tactical problems at the right time, so that we can start building towards a successful grand strategy. Operations is the artful decision-making about how we organize those activities in sequence and priority while managing risk. So that strategy, operations, and tactics model, that mental model, which guides all defense planning, turns out to be a great way to organize your thinking for your trading plan. How do you go from an assessment of the market and all its dynamic glory and moving pieces. How do you see opportunities in there? And then arrange your trading systems in such a way that opportunity one and then opportunity two in a different system, and then opportunity three in a third system based on the results of one and two allow you to get towards your final goal. How do you perform the tactical behaviors of your trading systems? That's tactics. How do you organize these things in time and space and resource them properly? That's operations. And strategy is your grand vision from how you get from point A to point B successfully while accounting for risks along the way. So it turns out that that kind of process modeling, that dynamic map of our situation, turns out to come from systems thinking. And it turns out to be a nice way to organize our different trading strategies into a larger grand system. Well, then if you drill down deeper into systems thinking, look at the tactics inside of our systems, it turns out that the input process output model is a systematic way to view how you perform your work. So when I do this as a trader, what I want as my output is a successful trade performed to standard in a reliable, efficient way. And I want my process to be the way that I plan and prepare for the execution inside my output. My output is a properly executed trade. And then the input are all the pieces and parts, the raw materials of information, infrastructure, attention and energy and capital. All of those pieces of raw material are the inputs, which then go into my organizing a trading frame, setting up a trade, executing that trade, followed by an assessment program, which can take a look at how well I'm doing that entire process. So you can think of that as the plan, prepare, execute, assess process is an example of a mental model that comes out of systems thinking and which is designed to allow you to be effective in your overall process and giving you the opportunity to focus on the individual phases and improve those performances and processes in order to raise the performance and quality of the entire system. If you then go a step further, you can think about identifying your KPIs or key performance indicators, which become the ways in which we measure the performance of each of these little subsystems against a standard to determine if we are meeting our objectives and performing to specification. And that's what quality means. Quality means performing to spec, performing to the required specification. And KPIs allow us to measure the things that matter. We're going to measure those crucial pieces and parts, which if we do those correctly, are going to lead to an increase in quality. You can only do that if you understand how your system is designed and how it's supposed to work so that you can determine if it is working to your required level. The common psychological, mental, and emotional state that we want to be in while we are performing this design and management process, and while we're actually inside of a trade and preparing to trade and trading and then exiting the trade, is what we call the zero state. So the zero state under self, discussed importantly on 273 to 274, is my metaphor for the mental state, the ideal mental state for trading. And it is, for me, centered on the now and not on the last trade in the past. So if I look at this axis as time, and let me make that a little easier to see in a minute, I want to concentrate on the now. And then if I look at my emotional state, I don't want to be out here in the land of joy or down here in the land of despair, because at some point, that's in both directions, there's a cutoff point where there's too much emotion out here that I cannot perform my execution properly. It moves me out of the zero state. If I'm in a state of despair or fear, I leave my desired state and I'm stuck down here. I want to be in this central circle. Similarly, if I'm too enthusiastic, too joyful about successful trading or having a very strong belief, that could pull me out of the zero state, and now I'm off kilter. If I spend too much time worrying about the past, then I am existing here and I'm not paying attention to the trade that's going on right now. And if I look too far in the future and imagining how I'm going to spend my money, or I'm worried about danger that hasn't arrived yet, that improper orientation in time can take me out of this zero state. So where I want to be is in the perfect balance, what I think of as the zero state, where I am in the mindful moment, not too much in the past, not too much in the future. And I don't want to be in too happy or too sad or fearful. I want to be in a professional, effective, idling state of mind where I'm getting ready to do some work. So we think of that space here in the middle as the zero state. Now, it turns out that each person defines what that zero state is for them uniquely. And one of the ways that you know you're in the zero state is that when you take a look at your performance on a histogram of trades, your best sustained trading is being performed when you're in the ideal state of mind for your performance. And that's going to vary by individual. So we only learn that by trading and experimenting with our own psychology and support systems, which reinforces Van's point about trading being mostly psychological. Notice that for me, and maybe for you, probably for you, that the zero state is not the absence of emotion, but it is an emotional state that is alert, dispassionate yet purposeful, a heightened state of alertness while remaining relaxed, balanced, and poised for action in any direction. Now, this definition for me comes back to my multiple decades in the Army as in the service. And the way I think of that is in this exercise, which comes from our foundations course that I want to share with you. It's that important. And we call this one the zero state visualization. I want you to notice that we have the joy and despair axis of emotion, and we have the past, present, and future horizontal axis. And every one of these numbered locations, 1 through 13, represents a slightly different orientation. And in this visualization, we ask you to feel what it feels like to be in each of those numbered states. Spend some time in each one and remember a specific moment when you were there. And so I define this central blue circle centered around 5 as the perfectly balanced trade-off on both emotions and time. It turns out, though, that my optimum place for trading turns out to be right here. I'm slightly off the center. That where my judgment is, my awareness is a little bit forward in time, maybe 5 to 10 bars, where I am anticipating where that trade could go, which means that while the time dimension is right here, I'm actually more concerned about where that trade might go. So if it's here, it could go that high or that low normally. This is where it would go if it just repeated the last little move, it would go right here. But this is now the band of normal behavior, maybe defined by statistics. And I know that as long as it's in between those two limits, that this is something of a normal behavior. But if it were to suddenly spike up, this would be abnormally good. And if it broke down, it would be abnormally bad. And so I need a set of rules that will tell me what to do when I'm under normal conditions. We think of that as standard work for normal conditions. And then I need a set of rules for standard work for abnormal conditions. Like if this one is easy. If it goes abnormally against me, my stop gets me out. So done. But it may be that if it continues to go to abnormally bad, I might need to stop and reverse. So I have to know where the limit is between a normal sell-off, which gets me out of the trade, and an abnormally large move, which gives me an opportunity to participate in a fearful move to the downside. And in the same way, if price goes from here up beyond the normal limits, I have to be able to look at second positions, third positions, and then be ready to take a catastrophic success exit to lock in more of this exceptional move. The way I do that is by having my orientation not fixated on exactly this price, because I know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm probably looking 5 to 10 bars ahead. And then I want to have just enough relaxed, calm, positive optimism that I'm not past the limit into the land of joy yet, but I'm not emotionally dead. I do have a slight positive orientation and enthusiasm for successful trading and professional trading. And so for me, it turns out that my optimal zero state is within the boundaries of this mindful moment, but with a slight orientation up and to the right in both time and joy. So that's where my particular zero state is. And when I say that I need something that looks like positive, dispassionate, but alert calmness, that comes from my years of being in the infantry, where we're moving in a long column at night through the jungle. And I'm at the head of that column as the point man, because I'm a great navigator and I'm very alert to my surroundings. And so as the point man, I'm leading our patrol forward, and I'm concerned about where are the enemy forces and can I detect them before they detect me so that I can protect my tribe, my squad, against possible enemies. So this guy has to be alert to everything, has to be able to dispassionately look in every direction, has to be able to sustain that energy level of alertness for long periods of time, and yet be well trained enough to be able to react to contact when it happens. Well, that's the mindset that I have adopted as my ideal state when I am performing as a trader over here in my optimal zero state. And so one of the things that I have learned is how to detect when I've left the reservation or I've left the area. I become too fearful or in despair or too joyful, and I have to get back to the zero state so that I can trade properly. And I have techniques that allow me to quickly go from these excessively emotional states to get back to the zero state within 5 seconds. And that is a teachable, learnable skill that will vary based on who you are and what works for you, but it's something that can be learned, discovered, and reinforced, and can be taught on how to use that when you actually need it the most. You can discover your own nature to put you in the zero state. What are you like when you're in your ideal trading state? How did you get there? And then we can learn not to work too hard. We can let natural forces, our natural dispositions, just help us get into that condition. If we can learn to stop overthinking it, stop fighting ourselves, we can learn how to do that. So we can think about where we want to be in the during portion of the trade when we're in it. What do you do if you find yourself over here in the green dot where you are too joyful thinking about successful trades in the past, and your focus on this is blinding you to what's going on in front of you? Or what if you were way out here and now suddenly you were worried about all the things that could go wrong as a disaster, and you're not paying attention to the steps you should be taking to protect yourself in the moment? How long does it take you to get from these unhealthy states back to your personal zero state? How can we make that a routine process that requires no extra cognitive effort, but is the most natural and refreshing behavior that we can optimize? So we want to look for ways that I can get back to my zero state and to be more energized when I get there, so that it doesn't cost me energy to get there. I get recharged by being in that professional mind state. That's what we mean by the zero state. Well, another way to look at that same zero state is, how do I go from a state in the world where I have all of these things on my mind? I have goals, habits, skills. My thoughts and feelings and the issues and what's going on. The inside of my head is a busy place. All the work that I put into preparation and the things I'm dreaming about and the emotions that I'm feeling and all the memories that are floating around in my head. I'm in this exaggerated, complex, agitated state. But where I need to be for trading, for me in the zero state, is what I envision as a battle circle, where it is me, naked, two hands on my sword with an opponent, and we're going to get ready, we're going to bow, and we're going to fight. How do I go from this exaggerated state of um, looking at many things all at once? How do I go from there until I'm ready to trade? My process is the metaphor of the ready room. For me, the ready room is a sacred place, and I go there for one reason, and that is to prepare for war, to prepare for battle. That's how I see trading. And 25 years of active duty service, combat experience, and another 23 years of teaching Army officers how to do that makes that a really powerful metaphor for me. Your metaphor may vary. But how I think of this is that in my mind, I approach the dojo, the ready room, and I enter through that doorway. And in the ready room, I offload all of the accoutrement, all of the equipment and the extraneous non-trading things. I offload all of that. I stack it neatly in my locker where it goes. I draw my trading equipment, which is well maintained and stored properly. And then I prepare my head, my heart, my gut, my hands, and my feet to get ready. And when I'm ready, I walk down the Hall of Champions through that gate and into the battle circle, ready to trade. And that's a process that I go through every day that I trade. And I've done this so many thousands of times at an emotionally rooted level that when I'm in a trade and I'm not in the zero state, I can go through this process quickly and get rid of all of the distractors and jump right back into this readiness in less than 5 seconds, reliably. As measured by my mental state of mind, my heart rate monitor, etc., all the biofeedback devices and regulated breathing. That's how I perform zero state readiness for trading. That's a process. That is a system. That is systems thinking for traders. How do you create a high reliability organization? We talk about that on pages 275 and 276. This also comes from systems thinking, from the work of Carl Weick and Kathleen Sutcliffe. And what they studied was the following phenomenon, that if you think about all the new businesses that are out there, a guy is passionate about something, he follows his bliss, he gets his plan together, and he goes into business, and 90% of those businesses fail in less than 5 years. Failure in less than 5 years. It's not because they weren't passionate. It's just that it's hard to be successful in the world. But there are some organizations that are successful, which we're glad of, because if they failed, the results of failure would be catastrophic. For instance, like a nuclear power plant or an aircraft carrier or firefighters. So Sutcliffe and White studied these organizations, which are notoriously successful. How do they overcome the normal human experience of reliable failure to become high reliability organizations? What makes them special? After decades of research, they found that there are 5 cultural characteristics of high reliability organizations. And our goal is to create our own trading business and trading systems, our team, following these principles, a preoccupation with failure or risk management, so that failed trades or losing trades is feedback and a learning opportunity, and understanding the impact of mistakes, which is not following your rules, is the first place that you go to improve your system. Second, a reluctance to simplify your interpretations. When you oversimplify, you lose information by distorting, deleting, and generalizing. So don't make it simpler than it is or too simple. With just the right information, you can better determine the cause of your mistakes. That means you might have to be concerned with details when other people want to take the easier way and attribute it to a simple but erroneous black and white explanation. Sensitivity to operations. By focusing on what happened, And your responsibility is part of that. And that's why daily debriefings and assessments are so important. You really have to go back and replay the game film, which is why that's an essential element of our daily after action review. A commitment to resilience, which is the ability to bounce back from a setback. That's where Dr. Michael Hall's work and Van's work on respondability is really crucial. How do we build up our emotional resilience bank account so that we are resilient when we need it, that we have thick skins and the ability to respond? How do we do that? And then deference to expertise. So a process of continually training and working towards expertise and integrating expert advice when needed. Those 5 qualities are the things that distinguish high reliability organizations from routine human behaviors. You can use that as a checklist, as a rubric to check yourself. To what extent does my behavior and systems manifest those 5? As a checklist, you can consult on page 271. This comes from the work by Dr. Atul Gawande in his book, The Checklist Manifesto, in which he showed that hospitals that adopted checklists was the equivalent of having a brand new medicine that was 70% improvement of people's health. That's what checklists do in hospitals. That's what checklists will do for you in your input, process, and output, in your plan, prepare, execute, assess. Checklists are a craftsman's way of efficiently ensuring that all the hard-won wisdom that we've accumulated over the years is still being applied properly forward into the next trade. So what's common across all of our trading at the strat, op, and tactical levels in all our processes? We look for efficiency so that we can use common tactics or fractal frames in all our trading systems, like having a standard method of entry and a common exit strategy so that no matter which particular swing trade the system got us into the trade, we exit and manage that trade in one way, and then collectively think of all of that as our meta system of swing trading, consisting of the integrated work of multiple subsystems. That is systems thinking. Other guiding principles: the idea of never losing more than 1R on a trade, with the goal of attempting to make at least 2R in every trade, which led us to the idea of the Zeno stop. We say, look, I have some prep work that I've done, and I'm going to think of that as the hypothesis of this trade, that according to that hypothesis, let's say a 5 days down, if this breaks above yesterday's high, it could go up to the 10-day high without it being abnormal behavior. That would be normal behavior. And if I use today's price range as the risk, and if that's my risk box that I can manage tomorrow, I want to have at least 2-to-1 reward to risk ratio when using standard framing techniques. When I assess my performance, what I'm looking for is evidence that I can establish a standard measurement of risk and never take more than 1R loss, which means now that I have reasons to believe that I can identify a risk. And then if my rewards on average are bigger than my losses, then I can say that I can estimate a reasonable 2 units of reward, which justifies taking the 1 unit of risk. If I can do that over many iterations, I'm going to get a histogram of results of between -1 and +2 that is positive expectancy for my routine trading. And as you heard in a previous session, if I eliminate losses greater than 1R, no losses worse than 1R, but some wins greater than 2R, then I've got a fat right tail, no fat left tail, and then I have a positive expectancy between -1 and +2, which pays to hang around and manage the exceptional gains. That is statistical process control. That is systems thinking. That is quality control in manufacturing. When I think of my trading as a manufacturing process, I realize that there are 5 different places where I can look to make improvements. And if we use quality control theory, we realize that our own process of trading, how we trade, requires some input in the form of information and raw materials, which we then process, and it produces a finished trade. And then that trade is gonna go to my accountant, who's going to assess our performance in terms of dollars and in terms of our multiples to determine if we are above the break-even line and that we can afford to keep trading. Well, the raw materials that I get are coming from a variety of suppliers. So when we're looking to improve the quality of our overall performance, usually guys will run to the end and see what's wrong with our numbers. What kind of quick fixes can we do after the fact without evidence to try to prevent losses in the future or to reduce their size or to increase our wins? And so that's looking at the horse after it's left the barn. So that's the 5th place in priority we want to go to. The 4th place we want to go to is to take a look at the boundary between the trade and the result. So that's the exit of the trade before it goes into the customer's process. So if I manage the exits better, I'm going to get better results, which is going to improve this accounting and assessment process. But in not just the exit, if I go back into my process and I use standard practices and efficient methods and accurate instruments in a zero state mind, and that I've aligned my trading target with the market and the sector that's moving in accordance with the time of the day, week, month, and season, and I have a good IT infrastructure, and I am in a state of emotional balance that I don't have distractors in my trading environment. There's a lot of things that I can do to make micro improvements in my own execution of my trading process until I get out of the trade at the exit. So every improvement that I make in each of those little identified areas is a improvement to my current trading process, and that's the 3rd in the priority. But if I want to improve all of my trades downstream, I go back and I take a look at how good are the raw material inputs that I'm using. So the place that I get those from my supplier. So I take a look at when I sign for the equipment and the resources. What I have to have is I have to have a checklist at the loading dock that says all of the things that my supplier is giving me are meeting my specifications. Like if I need information that is accurate and timely and I don't get it, I stop it and I don't accept it and I don't even trade with it until all of the supplies that are coming from external sources have all met my minimum acceptance criteria. And when I do that at the loading dock, I'm going to get better raw materials to improve my process and my output and my results. But I don't have to wait to inspect the receipt of those raw materials. I can go up into my supplier's process and take a look at how they produce the things that I use to do my trading. Like I can get a better quote server that's faster and more accurate and covers more symbols and is error free. And maybe I can have a better charting platform that gives me more nuance or an improvement on my programming language so that I can program in the complexity of my rule sets, and a better broker who gives me better execution. So by going back up into my supplier's process and choosing the guys that give me the best quality raw materials, I'm actually improving the quality outputs of everything downstream. So when we use a systems thinking approach and we map our trading process from start to finish, we use the plan, prepare, execute, and assess model for all our systems. I can use this orientation to make sure that I'm improving things that have the greatest payoff in the most places downstream. That is systems thinking. That is statistical process control. That is professional systems planning. So, it kind of in conclusion, Griff's notes to himself, his synthesis is that one of the big edges we have is being able to use standardized techniques across different time frames and strategies. That's where these fractal patterns and standard work, SW, standard work, helps us figure out how to simplify and standardize our work. He says it only took him about 5 years to figure that out. We can do faster. And he notices that it wouldn't be crazy to use the entry and exit techniques that he uses on the Kata 2 challenge system for intraday trading. He can actually use that plus the fractal patterns for swing trading. Yes, I've been telling him that for 3 years. I'm glad to see that he understands that in writing. And then finally, his note to self for action. How can I improve entries on the longer term systems to be a little more elegant using the PSAR flip and the Kata 2 long entries as entry points? So now what he's learning to look at is to look at the flow of daily bars through the lens of the PSAR flips. That when you see price breaks below that PSAR level right there, you realize that that's the exit of a trade that entered when the PSAR flipped here, and your trade looks like that, and that is the signal that gets you out. And the size of the risk box, price would have to get above this price level in order to flip the PSAR and go long. So that means that in that mindset, if that was your entry short, then your risk box would be here. And in order for that to be a valid trade frame, if that's my risk, then I have to have a reasonable hypothesis of why that trade could move 2 units of reward compared to the 1 unit of risk. And if I can justify with evidence and history and back testing and study that this price level on the downside is not unreasonable, then I can say that I have a 2-to-1 reward to risk, and I can consider taking that trade when my exit is hit. I can then say, should I stop and reverse? I would say, well, do you have time, will, pattern, and money? Is there enough time left in the day for this trade to unfold? Is there enough time? Are you in the zero state emotionally and psychologically so that you can trade according to your professional standard? Do you have a recognized pattern that yields 2-to-1 in the time frame that's available? And do you have the risk capital available to trade? If you have all four of those things, then you have the necessary conditions where you can take that trade. Does that mean you will take that trade? No, unless your will is to say, I always take it without any further thought. But you must have all four of those elements in our style of trading: time, will, pattern, and money, in order to even think about taking that trade. And since we know what all four of those dimensions are, we can be moving along with price here in this mindful moment. And we can be thinking ahead 5 units or 5 bars in time, as I said. And I can be taking a look at what is the path of normal price action from here, and when does it become abnormal in either direction? How do I protect with my stop the adverse move before it becomes abnormally large, so that I can enjoy the abnormal win, but only give back a normal amount? But if it actually accelerates in time and it breaks above the boundary of abnormally good, how do I get alerted to that? And what are my rules that might allow me to add a second position here and to accelerate my stop higher so that I can lock in more of an abnormally large gain? So it's the study of exit management over time through conditions of normal and abnormal that we make our professional money, not by being locked into what price is doing this exact minute, because we have entry rules for that. We've already made the decision to get in and where to put our stop, and our next decision is when to move that stop to lock in no lose plus dinner for two. And so we're looking ahead slightly in order to have the right orientation to be ready for that moment when it comes. That's what we mean by when I am talking about the zero state, for me, being slightly forward in time. I need to be slightly forward in time and with positive confidence, positive professional confidence, that that I have the energy to act properly when the time arrives. Not so much that I become excessively joyful or fearful, or I lose sight of the mindful moment by worrying about the future or the past. No, I'm within this little boundary of excellence. And as long as I'm in there, I'm good enough to trade. But where I really want to be is inside that little space, which is my optimum place to trade. That is my optimum spot. That's my personal zero space right there, for all the reasons that I described earlier. That's everything that I wanted to cover tonight. I'm open to your questions for 2 or 3 minutes before we have to hit the road. But over to you guys. That's everything that I wanted to cover tonight. I guess, oh, I guess I forgot to say, his other action steps included a deeper understanding of markets and their behaviors to understand risk to reward. I could have covered that a little better. And that is that we want standard planning norms to help us frame trades and estimate reward to risk. And that for us, that includes these big ideas, which are discussed in the book, by looking at the previous day's high and lows as significant, looking at support and resistance levels on different time frames, using the turning points of the RL10 and where the PSAR flips as objective measures of key price levels. And those kinds of techniques help us set up reasonable targets where we can combine statistics like the range stat, the gap stat, and whatnot to help us frame reasonable trades. And it's that deeper understanding, which is really sensitivity to operations and a reluctance to simplify interpretations, which connect. This is behavior that connects to the high reliability organizations section. So this section today was really talking about due diligence of a professional. And the key insight is that the word due diligence should be spelled due diligence. It's one thing to know these things, like all of this stuff is good to know, but are you doing them? Are you doing your due diligence? That's what separates the amateur and the hobbyist from the professional. Decide which bucket you want to be in. Yes, this one. That's the correct one. Be professional. That professional feeling, the feeling of being professional as you do all this work, this preoccupation with failure, studying the complexity, using the tools, all of those things go into your resilience. The positive energy you get from being professional gives you the resilience to do what must be done. And that's what I wanted to say for tonight. All right, take good care, guys. We'll get this published and posted in the online course workshop, along with the note sheets, which you can also, which you can download from in here in the chat. This one is essential. This is the part of the book where guys who are amateurs or hobbyists with trading say, why are you talking about this stuff? I want to know the magic bullet for entering and how to find the magic target. Shut up. Go learn your craft or not. I just say the more guys that don't understand this, the easier our trading becomes. Hate to say it that way, but that's just the truth. So take good care, and we shall see you on down the road.